everyone. This is Julia Yarbough with Keeping It Real Caregiving on Air. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And as I like to say in the world of family caregiving, getting old is not for sissies, neither is family caregiving. Joining us today is Rowena Branch. She too is a family caregiver. She takes care of her elderly father. Rowena, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Julia.
So we have known each other for years, and we both are in the same situation of caring for an elderly parent. Tell me a little bit about your situation and your father. And at this point, you have a lot on your plate.
Yes, I think my situation is unique in caring for my 87-year-old father in that there are no other family members to provide any support. My mother passed away in 2006. My sister passed away in 2008, which left my father and I. He was living independently until last year. He has a series of health issues right now that he cannot live alone. He did not want to leave California to live with me in the state of Michigan. So I had no choice but to put him in assisted living. However, he's not thriving in that environment, so I need to make some decisions at this point.
And so again, your situation is extremely unique because you're not even in the same region as your father. How did you go about actually finding a location when you were on the East Coast and your dad was in California?
Last year, during the height of COVID in April, May 2020, I noticed that my father's patterns, which with the elderly population, they have certain routines every day. So I noticed that he was off routine. I got a little concerned. I hopped on a plane. And if I had not joined him in 2020, May 2020, he may have passed. And so I stayed there for 4 months to care for him. And we had reached a point where I could no longer be away from my son. So I gave him the option. Either he could come live with me or he would have to live in assisted living. Now, the other option that we looked at prior to making the final decision, have him remain in his home and hire an aide. But as you know, Julia, that's a very, very costly option to have, 24/7 care. It's very, very expensive.
Now, I would imagine that situation of changing, of putting your father into a care facility was difficult, not only for you, but your father is retired military. He very strong man throughout his life. What was that like, the dynamic of working with an elder father and having him see the value of perhaps being someplace that was safer than in his home by himself?
Obviously, there was a lot of guilt, a lot of tears for both of us. It was a very, very, very difficult month prior to his move. And of course, I felt very guilty about the situation.
Was there anything particular that you said to him to help him make this transition? I know in my situation, I gave my mom a choice. I said, you can come and live with me or you can stay where you're at. Thankfully, she made the right choice to say, I'll come live with you, but it's not always that smooth and cut and dry. What was
Yes.
that was the turning point for your father?
Well, I think he realized, as difficult as it was at the time, is that he had exhausted all of his resources, and he also knew that he could not take care of himself. I mean, you know as well as anyone, is that the pill routine in itself, just the medication, I mean, you have to, sometimes I had an Excel spreadsheet, I had checklists. It's very, very complicated. And he was also diagnosed with early signs of dementia. So he was not able to manage his daily routine anymore. And I think facing that hard fact was very difficult for him. And so he realized he had no choice. But he did not, and he's not thriving there right now, which is why I need to make other arrangements.
What are the health issues that your dad is facing?
He's on oxygen 24/7. He had a pacemaker surgically, implanted in him last year because he has some heart issues. As a result, that's why he has the oxygen. He also has type 2 diabetes, has arthritis in his knees, which makes it very difficult for him to be mobile. I mean, the knees are a critical joint, correct? And another area of concern that he has is he has lost his balance.
Who was the man that you remember when you were a little girl?
Well, I just remember him loving baseball, loving the outdoors, loving good food. Seeing my father now, is not my father. You know, I just remember my father from my childhood or when I was a younger adult, right? And so seeing him now, it makes me very sad. But then at the same time, when you observe your parent in this situation, you also look at your own life. It forces you to look at your own life and explore the kind of path that you want to live.
And so in all of those years when you see your father now, have you ever had a chance to talk to him adult to adult of what his life has been and what he wanted for you as his daughter?
We always had those conversations. However, last year when I was with him for 4 months taking care of him, I learned so much more about my father because now that I'm older and wiser, I pay attention more. I ask different kinds of questions. And so I'm even though those 4 months were very difficult, I really appreciate the opportunity to get to know him in a different way. And also, since he was weaker, I think he allowed himself to be more vulnerable and to share a bit more than I think he did in the past.
For someone who may be entering into family caregiving, based on your experiences, what are the top 5 suggestions that you would offer to them?
But the first thing that I would advise a caregiver to look at is their financial picture, not the short term, but do long term planning on what is feasible based on their finances. The second thing that I would also recommend is make decisions based on what you can live with. Because eventually all of us are going to pass. And are you going to be able to live with the regret or any kind of guilt? Third item is encourage your elderly parent to exercise. Even when they don't want to, have them walk down the hall, have them move, because if it once they stop moving, then it becomes very difficult and a host of other health issues can come along. The other item is take care of yourself. I remember when I took care of my mother and my sister, I did not take care of my health. And as a result, later on, I also had some health issues. So it's very, 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 very important that you take care of yourself and taking care of your mental health as well. Have a break. And then the last thing is that it is very, very difficult to care for an elderly person when you're also very busy, maybe managing your own family, managing your career, but you have to have patience. You have to have patience for the process because nothing is going to move as quickly as your daily life, right? Once you're managing the taking care of the elderly, everything is at a slow pace. Getting into the car, getting an answer on a question. So you have to have a lot of patience.
Those are all, I'm listening to you going, yep, I experienced all of that. What do you think this process, this journey is teaching you about yourself and your own future?
Um, I think what it has taught me is it's okay to admit to yourself that you can't do it all. You have to at some point admit that these are my boundaries. This is all I can handle. This is my saturation point. And so it's really taught me that it's okay to let go of my ego, be a little humble about my career, and family is the most important thing.
Those are all great points. It's so interesting because I think a lot of us, we don't get to that point until we're faced with something like, watching our parents age. How do you navigate this last chapter?
So I think the challenge that I'm facing right now is that my dad is not thriving assisted living. So the option is I could keep him there and he can continue to decline, or I could risk his health and risk his situation, put him on a plane and move him to the state of Michigan so that he could live with me. Both of those options are not ideal. And so it's been very difficult for me to make this decision. And I think this has been the most difficult part of the process. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation, Julia, where you're so fatigued mentally that you can't even make a decision because you're just so tired. And so that is where I'm at right now.
Okay, I'm going to reach out and hug you in the middle of our interview through the internet.
Okay, I'm accepting it. I'm accepting it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I want to make my dad happy. It's really about what he wants, and he wants to be near me and his grandson.
A couple of years back, did you ever envision that this is the situation you'd be in today?
I have thought deeply about that question. I don't think anyone in our generation thinks about those things. It's really made me think about the choices that we all make in life, because at the end of the day, we could become caregivers. Because I honestly, Julie, to answer your question, I never thought that I would be in this situation.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those realities in life that we don't think about. And
That's right.
I just want to say thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your dad and about your situation with us here on Keeping It Real Caregiving on Air, because that's part of the goal. I want everybody who joins us and all of our viewers and listeners to be able to think about the reality that this could be them in a few years, maybe even next week, and it could be us as we age. So, Rowena,
Yes.
thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're all praying and thinking good thoughts for you and your father, and we're going to stay posted on how that transition goes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody, that is going to do it for this episode of Keeping It Real Caregiving on Air. Stay with us online at keepingitrealcaregiving.com, also on Twitter and on Facebook. We are keeping you up to date and knowledgeable about what it means keeping it real in family caregiving. I'm Julia Yarbough, and I'll see you next time.